are going to move on from talking about trade and infrastructure to talking about trade and finance and investment. I'm going to bring in three big brains to sit next to me to help me have this conversation. Mr. Tom Kehoe is the Deputy Director of Agriculture at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Tom, please come and take a seat on the stage next to me. I appreciate that. Hello, good afternoon, good to see you. Mr. Mahesh Patel, hello, good afternoon. Please come and sit on the stage. Chairman of ETG Group. And from Rwanda, Ms. Nelly Mukaizire, who's the Deputy CEO of the Rwanda Development Board. Thank you so much. Please come and join me on the stage. Thank you. If you applause, it makes it even easier for them to walk all this way from their seats. A little gentle ripple. I know you're holding back for the moment. Let's see if they're good, and then you can applaud loudly.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I don't mind who sits next to me. I'm okay. Mr. Patel, in 30 seconds, tell us why you're on this stage talking about finance and investment. What makes you that special? Your biography in 30 seconds. 2 lines. Sure, Mr. Patel, tell us about yourself in just 30 seconds that makes you an expert on investment and finance to be in this plenary. What do we need to know? Briefly.
All right. My name is Mahesh Patel. I'm a chairman of ETG Group, which I formed from Kenya in 1967. And I have 45 years of personal experience in procuring agriculture products from smallholder farmers. And today, as we speak now, we procure over 10 million tons in various African countries. But it's very sad to see that these farmers from which we are producing, they have never become from subsistence to semi-commercial.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you to, you see how I'm almost eating the microphone? They're very, very sensitive, so come a little bit closer to the microphone so I don't miss a moment of what you're going to tell us. Tom, good to see you. Thank you for coming. In a nutshell, your biography, so the audience actually get, okay, I get why he's on the stage.
Good. No, obviously, being Deputy Director of the Gates Foundation, facilitating investment into Africa, we see especially agriculture is one of our key roles. And prior to this, I spent 19 years with Cargill Grain and led the expansion efforts into Africa about 8 years ago, so spent a lot of time. But I would defer to Chairman Patel on how to invest in Africa.
I have just been in Rwanda. I have just been talking to Nelly. So I know the answer to this question, but yet I will ask it anyway. Nelly, your bio in 30 seconds that makes it so important that you're on this stage talking about investment and finance.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Femi, and happy to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here as Deputy CEO of Rwanda Development Board. That's an institution that is in charge of attracting investment in Rwanda and facilitate ease of doing business. So working with different institutions, private sector, to have a conducive environment for investment. Thank you.
So the last time I was talking to Nelly, we were in Kigali, and she was hosting an evening of politicians who were very curious about how Rwanda was able to attract investments and money to Rwanda. That conversation is the kind of conversation we're having right now. We're going to regenerate Africa's food systems, transform them. We're going to need to attract investment. What can you tell us from your experience that will actually help us on a Pan-African level?
I think if I speak of the experience of Rwanda in everything in general, the first stage is intention, is the will, the intention to work on a certain specific or a certain aspect you want to do. So I give that example that over the years, there has been intention of revamping or rebuild the country. Rwanda is a country that is now only 29 years old from the genocide against the Tutsi. we had to rebuild a lot of things at the same time. But when it goes to understanding that investment is key in everything you're going to do, in changing the country's life development, and that goes also into agriculture. So speaking of practical examples, one, of course, it is to create that conducive environment in terms of regulation, in terms of processes. Previous speakers spoke about efficiency in what you do. That is already a platform that you set. But the second thing now is also work on areas or practical ways of enabling that. Today in Rwanda, we have special economic zones, industrial parks, where there is intentionally sections that are allocated to agriculture or agro-processing projects. So having that vision and build on it to practically set platforms for people to do that. The third I can mention is also accompanying it. Previous speakers spoke about infrastructure. It is one of the things government has to drive together with private sector, but today and in the future agriculture, there's some basic infrastructure you need that are also technologically speaking to the future. Irrigation systems, I would say 20 years ago in agriculture, that was rare or maybe not existing in some of African countries. So all that, and also skills that are going to bring the right yield, technology that you want to maximize. Everything is about efficiency and high productivity. And the last, which is not the least, is also to connect with access to finance and markets. So all that you can do it, you have good production, you have yield, but then what? If they don't have money to be able to regenerate the business or reinvest, or also markets, it won't give the end results. So all those areas, and particularly as RDB, we work with small and medium enterprises to give them capacity building so that they have the right skills, help them and accompany them for access to finance, and then also access to markets with other institutions, like the National Agriculture and Export Board has been created specifically for that, to be able to know what is needed out there and how do we get it from the country. So those are some of the stages I would mention for the case of Rwanda, but I'll be happy to chip in later in other questions. Thank you.
Tom, I'm thinking about data. If you speak to a data scientist, a data researcher, they will claim, and they will say very strenuously, you cannot make plans or strategies without having the data. So when we're talking about investment, finance, agriculture, food systems on the African continent, how much data is there? How important is the data?
Yeah, obviously data is super important, especially when you start looking at trade, right? And I think it's not just the data, but how you actually use the data to be predictable around policies. So if I look at investments in Africa, if we're really talking about how do you get it, there's two levels of investments. There's local companies, which I think is probably your safest bet always, is how do you facilitate local investment in homegrown companies to do that. But then you have the international companies, that I used to work for, et cetera. And a good point, a way to ask that question is how do you stimulate investment, is you can also say why is investment left, right? So if you look at in the commodity cycles in the world, in 11-12 there was a ramp up in food prices. So we've seen it come 07-08 crisis, it dipped, and then suddenly you started to see things take off, not because of drought or a crisis, but you started to see pressures on the global S&Ds. That put a rush on Africa. So if you remember back to that time, it was the rising of Africa. It was the time of Africa, and you've seen Cargill. They sent me here with double our footprint. So how do you put $1 billion? And if you found something interesting, phone for more. You've seen Dreyfus. You've seen several of the international food companies come in as now is the time. All of them have pretty much left now, right? I can't speak to the others, why they've divested into Africa, but I can speak to the Cargill experience was policy predictability, right? So when you build a crush plant, you need 20-year paybacks on these crush plants. And these facilities, to do it at a scale that's cost-effective for a food system, you need to be able to export those to your neighbors. You need to be serving the regional markets. If policy can be bad policy, but it needs to be predictable. So we had a situation in Zambia where a significant surplus, never seen an export ban before with a significant surplus, because it's probably the most damaging thing you could ever do for your farmers in your country. But the export ban went up. And so of course you lose lots of money, that's fine. Cargill does that all the time, we win and lose. But we can't manage a business, you can't invest in a business where you don't have control over the business. So if we knew when a policy would be inflicted, or fine, we can manage that. If it's random and not rational, then we can't invest. So again, I think actually it's sold to TTG. They're working with it now. And every other company has experienced that. So policy predictability around the markets, around the trade flow, is probably the #1 reason we're getting disinvestment into Africa.
Nelly, you're writing something down. You can just say it into your microphone so everyone can share it. Go ahead, press your microphone. What are you writing down?
And so, the most difficult job of this entire plenary goes to the VP of IFAD. This is why she has the big title, because she is going to wrap up this plenary. It is the Honorable Geraldine Mukashimana. Thank you so much for wrapping us up with your closing thoughts on us talking about trade and markets and how they fit in with our Africa food systems and transforming Africa food systems. VP, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Femi, for leading us through this afternoon. It was really wonderful sessions. And I really appreciate all the panelists that have kept us really awake, trying to connect the dots and understand what is needed. But I guess, as she mentioned, my job is much easier, is to close. But as we close this session on trade and markets, I have been trying to gather what are the key important messages, but I will just mention a few. I don't want to keep you here, but the message #1 that I could really grasp strongly through all the panels is that markets and trades are very critical tools for sustainable rural and food system transformation. And going forward, they are going to be heavily relying on the private sector for us to be able to grow economies and create jobs. And there is a number that is consistently said, don't know how much in 2030 the agribusinesses are going to be worth of $1 trillion. And this is only going to happen if our leaders are rethinking the way they are shaping up policies and supporting agriculture, farmers, and agribusinesses. The second message that I understood is that market and trades are to be inclusive. The aspect of inclusivity came up very, very strongly. And inclusivity is a crucial factor for market development. And it's going to require policy support and active engagements with farmers, with youth, with women, with MSMEs. Everyone has to be on the table for the market and trades to work. So the second takeaway that I gathered was that with the limited public sector resources, we know that most of our governments are burdened with what is happening, debts, fiscal pressure, competing priorities. So with these limited public sector resources, the private sector must play a bigger role in addressing gaps in financing. And let's not forget that the private sector is after profit making. That is true. And that comes back to the public sector to make sure that we are designing solutions that are commercially profitable, that are environmentally sustainable, but again and again, that are socially responsible. So, I mean, the estimate financing gap for small-scale farmers are exceeding 200 billion by some estimates. So the private sector is critical in meeting these needs and supporting sustainable development. Besides financing, we know that the private sector, once it comes in with opportunities of job creation, and it comes with the expertise, but also, most importantly, it comes with innovation. The third takeaway is that transforming African food systems require a different approach to scale up investment in infrastructure and the financial sector. This means that support the development of the modern agriculture across the continent, enabling farmers, particularly small-scale producers, needs to really to be investing in climate adaptation, new technologies that are adapted to their needs and context, and improve the quality of their produce. Also, the investment needs to enable farmers and SMEs and entrepreneurs to step up their process of value addition in agri-food value chains and meet the growing demand of high-quality, nutritious foods, including processed foods in a consumer market across the continent. Also, investments need to go into enabling Africa to substantially reduce food loss and waste. And also, they have to reduce dramatically the transaction costs associated with doing business in rural areas for all kinds of investors, down to small-scale farm levels. And the cost of going to market within countries and across borders, they really need to be at manageable levels. So, moderator, I think with that, I want to thank everyone who has been really actively participating in this engaging session. Thank you.
Many thanks, VP. Delegates, it is 5 p.m. The Trade and Markets Plenary is now over. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you to all the speakers who were on the stage, who did presentations, and who spent their afternoon here. Thank you too. Take care. Have a good evening. Thank you.